here in Maine. I've gotten a number of letters from Andy on behalf of the Congresswoman supporting grant applications. I've heard from Meg about great organizations here in the state. And we're always excited to go into Congresswoman Pingree's office and share a little bit about the grants we've given recently. Before we jump in, I wanted to go through a few of the materials that I brought with me today. I think these are really helpful. Also, NEH has more than 40 grant opportunities. There's no way I'm going to cover every single grant opportunity, so the sheet that has a lot of blue text on it has almost every NEH grant opportunity, but instead of being organized by division, it's organized by what you would like to do. So it's organized by questions like, I'm planning a museum exhibit, and it has a list of the grants that go towards that, or I'm developing a new course for my freshman curriculum, and it divides the grants into those areas. I also have a frequently asked questions document. It goes all the way from the very basics of what is the NEH and what are the humanities to it's time to submit on grants.gov. What do I need to do? What should I check off? And hint, hint, you need to get 4 emails from grants.gov to know that your application has been successfully submitted. So that is in here too. And then finally, I have a few little bookmarks and other fun things, including a bookmark for one of our newest grant programs, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I also wanted to see how many people here have been at an organization that's received an NEH grant in the past. Fantastic. Excellent. I saw a few name tags and organizations on the RSVP list, so it's great to see a number of grantees in the audience. So just starting off with the basics, the NEH is a federal agency. We were founded in 1965, so we're coming up on our 50th birthday. We're starting to put together some fun events and initiatives for our 50th anniversary, so please be on the lookout. Our primary purpose is to give grants and support humanities programming throughout the country. So we focus, though, on discipline. We give grants across a wide variety of organizations, but all of the projects that we fund are grounded in the humanities. You don't necessarily need to be a humanities organization to apply for one of our grants. You could be a science center, for example, but the project has to have a strong humanities foundation to it. One of my colleagues likes to joke that the humanities are the eggs in the batter to your project, not the icing on the cake. So if you're considering applying to NEH, really consider that humanities content in your project and why your project is an important humanities project. So I was so thrilled that Andy did a little straw poll of the audience to see where everyone comes from, because it gives us a good sense of who applies for NEH grants. So we covered a number of different disciplines and organizations. So we give funding to a lot of those organizations. So museums, archives, historic sites, cultural organizations, nonprofits. We have a number of grants for college faculty, community college faculty, and administrators. And then we also have grants that go towards multi-department projects at colleges and universities, or kind of institutional building projects. There are kind of 2 sides of the coin on our support for colleges and universities. We fund a number of museums and archives, cultural centers, theaters. We have Hayden from our State Humanities Council here in the back corner too, and they've received a few extra grants from NEH to do some amazing programming here in Maine. We also fund documentary filmmakers, radio programs, web designers. We have a number of special grants devoted to community colleges, tribal colleges and universities, historically Black colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, and we also give grants in certain categories to individual scholars. So I'm going to start off with our kind of, more public programming facing grants. Is anyone here from the local public television station or radio station? Okay, so I'm going to fast forward through this chunk. Okay, all right. So NEH has a few different grants that go towards the creation of media. They're called media project grants. We fund the creation of radio programs. So one of our famous ones is called Backstory with the American History Guys. It airs on a lot of NPR stations. It's also available for download as a podcast. And we fund the research that goes into the episodes and the scripting and their production. Similarly, we fund the creation of a number of documentary films, so the research that goes into a Ken Burns film, or a production like Constitution USA, which you see pictured here. A lot of these projects are all featured on our website too, because we found that they're really good for use in the classroom. So some of those folks from school groups may want to look at NEH.gov/explore to learn about some of the films and radio programs we fund. I know there are a number of museums here, and we've started to see a number of museums applying to do digital projects to create either online archives, websites, or apps. We have a new category called Digital Projects for the Public. It goes towards the creation of a app or a website that is public-facing. So rather than being a scholarly archive, we're funding the creation of a product that would get humanities content to a broad public audience. So an example of a project like this would be an app we funded or a mobile website we funded called Mall Histories, which is a map of the National Mall in DC that points to historic sites and locations and tags them with different humanities pieces, so film, archives, videos, but it's all very public-facing. Going into higher education, I saw we have a number of people here from colleges and universities. We have upcoming grant deadlines for our summer stipends and fellowships. Fellowships are year-long stipends for academics to do scholarly research. This could go towards the creation of a book, monograph, article, website, or other large-scale project. The summer stipends are a shorter version of that, so it's rather than a stipend to cover a whole year of academic research, a stipend to cover a summer of academic research. We have a few special versions of that due to for faculty at Hispanic serving institutions and historically Black colleges and universities and tribal colleges. We also offer a few collaborative research grants, and one called Collaborative Research, for research that involves multiple faculty members across departments and even across universities. So a faculty member from the University of Maine could collaborate with a faculty member at the University of Rhode Island, for example. We also fund some institution building projects. Although the grant program that currently does that, our Challenge Grants program, is undergoing some change. Its most recent deadline just passed, so we're waiting to see kind of where that program will take, what direction that program will take. In the past, it's gone to the creation of new departments, endowing a chair at or a faculty position, creating a multi-year lecture series. It may still do a lot of those things, but that also may shift a little bit. Also in the higher education realm, we fund the creation of large collections and organization of collections with scholarly research. So the autobiography of Mark Twain, pictured here, is an example of a scholarly editions and translations grant come to life. It's about this big, and there's two of them now. We also fund different collections and archives through our preservation and access grants. So we have the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources grant, which does a similar, has a similar function of preserving and then making available large collections of great importance. We also have a digital humanities grant program that focuses, instead of on projects that face the public, more projects that have a more scholarly focus. So the creation of an archive that will help scholars navigate ancient Greek texts or organize archives in a new way. We have a number of smaller and larger programs in our digital humanities grant program. Jumping into our grants for museums, libraries, and cultural organizations now, we have a number of different grants for museums and libraries across a few different divisions and some new ones that have just come out through our chairman's initiative. Starting off, I always like to talk about our grant programs that are called Museums, Libraries, and Cultural Organizations Grant Programs, because it's an easy one to remember. There are two grants within that category. One is for the development of a project, so that could be the planning for an exhibition, be planning for a walking tour or a discussion series or a long-term program. So this is, you know, a lot of the content and you have a pretty strong idea of what you want to do. You've done a lot of the research, but you still have some pieces to pull together. You've consulted with a few scholars, but you're not quite ready to get the exhibit built and installed. And you maybe have a few items to acquire. When you come back to us, or when you come to us for a production grant, that means you have an exhibition or a program that is ready to go on the ground. So you know exactly what the visitor experience is going to be like at your museum when a guest comes in. So you know that they will see X artifact when they walk in the door. It will have a certain amount of text by it. You know what that text will be, and you're at the final stages of development. We also have a program that then takes those exhibitions that we funded at larger institutions and scales them down so they travel around the country. We have a program that we fund called NEH on the Road. It's run by the Mid-America Arts Alliance, and it travels exhibitions that would fit in a space about this size across the country. We have a few new exhibitions that have just come on the docket, so those are available for you to bring here to Maine. In addition to the public programming at museums and libraries, we also fund preservation work at museums, libraries, and cultural organizations. We have our Preservation Assistance Grant for small institutions whose deadline is today, unfortunately, but our deadlines are offered cyclically, so this will be offered again next year. These grants we term them our outreach grants. They're a good starter grant program for organizations that are looking to do some basic preservation work and have a consultant come and analyze their collection. They often go to museums and libraries that are receiving their first federal grant, and the application process is a little bit simpler than our other grant programs. We've seen a number of these grants go to Maine, too. We also fund a number of reading and discussion programs. A lot of these are run through the American Library Association, so we have a program that will be starting up in the fall called Latino Americans, which is based around the film that aired on PBS in 2013. And we have a number of other public discussion programs. We just launched a new grant program as part of our Common Good initiative that's called Humanities in the Public Square. The aim of the program is to encourage discussion series around big issues in the humanities. So our chairman likes to talk about how there are a number of these big questions that we don't often think include the humanities. So data and technology and privacy, or the experience of veterans returning from war. But in fact, those are all questions that revolve around big humanities themes and involve philosophy and history. And so the Humanities in the Public Square grant program, which is one of our new programs, will fund discussion series and programs to engage public audiences in these big discussions. Also, with our new Common Good initiative, we have a grant program called Common Heritage, which I put out bookmarks for on the table. This is a pretty neat grant program. We've been calling it our Antiques Roadshow grant program. The funds that will be distributed through this will go to an institution who will do a day of digitization in their community. So they will get some digitizing equipment, invite the community to come bring personal artifacts, digitize them, and then the organization can sort through the collection that they receive and create a special exhibit and then do some sort of public program around it. So if you do this with your community and you get a lot of interesting family recipes, you could do an event on foodways and culinary history in your region. Or if you get a lot of mementos from veterans in your community, you could do a discussion on the history of service in your community. Speaking of veterans, we have part of our Common Good initiative is our commitment to serve veterans and connect them with the humanities. The Maine Humanities Council is one of the premier parts of this initiative. The council runs a program called Literature and Medicine, which started at hospitals in Maine, then expanded to VA hospitals, and then with funding a few years ago has branched off to serve not just faculty and staff, but also veterans. It's active across the country, and it's inspired a number of other programs too. We also have a few other programs that are part of our Standing Together initiative. We have a theater program that does performances across the country for groups of veterans and civilians to start conversations around ancient Greek drama. And we funded a program with the Great Books Foundation to do other reading and discussion events. Also with the Common Good are a few other grant programs that will be rolling out in the next few months, so please check back in. We're anticipating there will be a new program for community colleges within the next 2 or 3 months that will roll out. So if you're a community college faculty member or know community college faculty, keep checking back on our website because it should come out soon. I'm going to jump back to the slide I skipped, which is supporting teachers. I brought 2 bookmarks with me. The other bookmark is for our lesson plan website called Excitement. Excitement is a curated set of lesson plans. It was started as part of Verizon's Thinkfinity network, and now NEH operates it in-house. We have a staff dedicated to reviewing and creating lesson plans that meet Common Core standards, provide deep humanities enrichment, and offer interactive activities for students. Often their lesson plans include good discussion programs, video clips, and other things to get students really engaging with humanities issues. Every summer, too, NEH offers summer workshops for teachers, and both K-12 teachers and then summer workshops for college and university faculty. So you see pictured here in the top corner a few teachers at a workshop a few summers ago in Chicago. These workshops are often announced in November, and the application deadline is in March. So the programs for this summer are all full, but I encourage you, if you're a teacher, to check in the fall for our next slate of summer programs for teachers. And then I've mentioned the Maine Humanities Council. They also have a number of other, in addition to their veterans work, programming and grant opportunities available as well. NEH supports state humanities councils in every state and territory. Each takes on the local flavor of their state, and there's a lot of great things happening across the country because of our state councils. So now I'm going to dive into some tips for applicants. And starting off, I always like to talk about how great our staff is. NEH staff are extremely helpful and enthusiastic, and they want to hear about your projects. Our program officers who work on the grant programs wear 3 different hats. They assist potential applicants, often reading drafts. We can't read drafts in every program, like the new Common Heritage and Public Square programs. The timeline is too short, but for many of the others outside of the Summer Stipends program and the Fellowships program will read drafts. They coordinate the peer review process so they know what reviewers are looking for in a solid grant application and give advice. And they're also very experienced in their field, so they can offer guidance on what makes a project strong, who are the best people to talk to, and what a grantee or an applicant should be doing to improve their application. Starting off, I always suggest going to our website. It has all of the grant programs listed online. Each program has its own web page with sample applications, budget narratives, budget documents, frequently asked questions, and the actual application materials. It also has contact information that actually goes to a person. There are phone numbers and email addresses that are the names of the program, and so you would think, I don't know if that actually goes to a person, but they actually do, and they get responded to. My favorite is our Humanities Initiatives grant program. The email is hi, so hi@neh.gov. So our staff are reading and listening. I also recommend as I had everyone raise their hand who's received a grant, there are a number of people out in the field who have received our grants and know what reviewers are looking for, so asking peers for advice is always helpful. As I mentioned, we have sample applications available on our website for almost every grant program. We've even pulled for our new programs applications from other programs that would fit the bill. They often include, they're often very compelling examples, ones that stood out to reviewers and that make the case very well. And they're even, too, often organized for different projects across a program. So we have a few broad programs, and we'll have 3 or 4 different sample applications that meet different types of things that the applicant could do. Start early. I can't say this enough. Our grants take a while to put together. It's not always easy. And I also recommend submitting before the grants.gov deadline. You'll hear from NEA that they have an earlier deadline, and after a recent experience with a grantee with questions, I think it's a really smart thing that they do that. Also proofread. If we're humanities people, we're a little bit nitpicky. Your application's reviewed by a peer review process, so imagine 5 of your toughest college professors reading your grant application. So you don't want misplaced commas and not matching verbs and subjects. You can, as I mentioned, for many of our programs, you can send draft applications to our program officers for comments at least 6 weeks before the deadline. That gives them enough time to read it and give you comments and feedback. One of my colleagues actually has a countdown in his office that every few days he checks off the number of days until the deadline for his program. He's very excited for that deadline. And then you can also receive comments on your denied applications. So we will give comments directly from the reviewers, so you can see where the strengths were in your applications and where areas that confuse the reviewers or places you need to improve. And you can reapply, so you can take into account the comments from the reviewers and reapply. We bring in all sorts of new folks to be peer reviewers, so your grant application is looked at by a completely different set of eyes the next time you apply. And as I mentioned, our grants are offered on a fairly cyclical basis, so if a grant program was offered in May 2015, it will likely be offered again in May 2016. So you can plan ahead and employ long-term thinking. We like to see projects that are significant and build upon their field. Again, this goes back to articulating that humanities content, but also why your project is important to the field you're working in. And then finally, we like to see that a project is doable and will be completed. We want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, so we want to see projects that will come to completion. They don't necessarily need to come to completion during the grant period, so we can give a grant that's for a year part of a 5-year project. We just want to know that you have a plan and you have the people involved that will make it come into being. We also want to see that there's an audience. The audience doesn't have to be huge and vast. It could just be your field or your college or your community, but we do want to see that there is demand for the project, that it will answer a question that people need answered. And then that you respond to our guidelines and follow directions. That is always very important. And then finally, I want to go through the grant review process. I always think it's important to know who's looking at your grant application. One of the things we suggest is that even though we gather specialists from your field to do the peer review panel process, we have a National Council of 26 presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed individuals who are humanities celebrities, but they're not always experts in every field. So sometimes the Digital Humanities National Council panel will have scholars who don't do much in the digital humanities. So having a lot of that jargon trips them up and makes it difficult to understand what your project is trying to accomplish. Our grants are also finally all reviewed by our chairman, and so we need to, again, we're thinking about being good stewards of taxpayer dollars to see that your project will do something great for the humanities. This is our website. Like I mentioned, there is a spot where each grant program has a page. It's NEH.gov/grants. You can also see in the About Us section information about our chairman, contact information for all of the state humanities councils, and other programs and projects that are ongoing. I'll just touch briefly on grants.gov. Like I mentioned, it's not always the easiest website to work with, so we recommend starting early with the grants.gov process. There are a number of different help desks and lines to use, but if you start early and you're in contact with the person who handles grants.gov at your organization, hopefully you'll be on the right track. And of course, make sure your DUNS and SAM registrations are up to date as well. Here's my contact information, and we'll be taking questions at the end and sticking around for a little bit to hear about what you guys are doing. So thank you.